today. Megan, thank you so much for your time, and we really appreciate you sharing your story.
Yeah, of course. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, let's get to it. Do you mind starting by just sharing a little bit about yourself and your job search?
Sure. So my background, I'm a 26-year veteran in kind of the corporate side of wholesale and retail. So it's very niche. The players are kind of all over the place. The great thing for me is being in Dallas-Fort Worth. I'm in a hotbed. So there's a lot of activity in the area. And the cool thing is that there's companies relocating here every year. So that makes the market super hot, but it also makes it super competitive. So that's kind of my background. And then, mostly what I've done in the past. So I've done a little bit on the procurement side, but my field tends to be a little bit what people consider to be like specialized. So my field is in merchandise financial planning. So you have to think about that in terms of, I run the checkbook for the buyers. I'm the one who manages all the inventory. I'm the one who's making recommendations on budgets, making recommendations on, upside, downside, and then also kind of all the inputs that go into the P&L for the business unit.
Okay, got it. And so the types of roles that you were looking for, like what would some examples be?
So some of those roles that I was looking for would have been like merchandise financial planning. So whether it was a director level, individual contributor, sometimes people refer to it as supply planning or demand planning. Supply planning can be very different because a lot of times people try and loop in things like logistics and raw materials. So it's a little harder to hunt and peck through some of those. But once you start kind of seeing who the players are, you recognize if they're calling something a supply planner, sometimes they mean demand planning. And other times they literally mean like you're going to be talking logistics, which is not my forte. So those things kind of get shuffled to the side. And then, occasionally there would be other things that would pop up. People would call it a business planner or other great keywords that I was hunting for was like e-commerce, wholesale, that kind of thing.
Okay, got it. Yeah, that's pretty common. We see where one company might refer to a role as XYZ, and then another company will call it ABC, and you just kind of have to understand what those are. Okay, got it. And then will you share a little bit about the role that you landed?
Yeah. So the role that I ended up getting, actually, I was contacted by a recruiter. So that was the wild part, is it wasn't something that I had seen on any job boards. It's actually an e-commerce demand planning job at Samsung Electronics USA. So the cool thing about them is that even though it's a Korean-run company, they have several office hubs in the United States. Obviously New Jersey, Plano, Texas, which is just north of Dallas. And then I believe that they have some West Coast as well. I was contacted by a recruiter. He wanted to know if I was interested and could I send him over an updated resume. And that's actually one of the neat things about using your tools, that I could take that job listing that he sent me and I could paste it in and take one of my templates that I had created from my original resume. I made actually probably 3 or 4 versions, depending on, what the scope of the job was, what the title was, take out some things, add some more flavor, whatever, so that I could just start with kind of a template almost, and then let the AI tool kind of rework the things that it saw in the job and say, hey, can you add these words? I found that very helpful. I loved that part of it, and being able then to go into the resume after it's generated and tweak some things to say, okay, I know that this is going to be a hot topic or a keyword. I want to make sure that I add it. Or like the skill set at the bottom, I want to go in. They specifically asked for certain business intelligence tools. So even though I didn't have experience with this one specific business intelligence tool that they used, I was able to add in kind of the ones that I have worked on that are the same, that might be another WYSIWYG or something. So I felt that was super helpful. And actually my recruiter, when I sent it to him, he responded back. He's like, this is fantastic because it gives them interesting bullet pointed information because they reformat everything. And it was really easy format for him to kind of pull apart and put into their format.
Nice. That's great to hear.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you. Our tool gives you a good baseline, but you still want to go in there and personalize it. You might want to make a tweak, add or edit something based off of the job that you're applying for. So that's great. How long had you been looking?
So I actually got laid off at the end of February. So it took just at 6 months from my official last day, not the day they asked me to leave, to land a new job. And the interesting thing is I had originally started with a resume that I had paid a ridiculous amount of money for probably 2 years ago. From a professional resume writing service, and they had redone, they'd redone my LinkedIn profile, and they helped me with career builder profile, all sorts of stuff. And that didn't land me, but I think one interview. And once I switched over, I actually heard about EarnBetter through a posting from a talent and acquisition person. They were like, these are some of the tools we like to use that we would recommend that are gratis. And once I started doing that, I actually ended up with probably between May and end of August with something like 30 interviews.
Wow.
It was an honest game changer, simply because I feel like things have changed so much with the introduction of ATS systems and kind of the formatting that people want to see versus what resume writers think should be on there. It takes out a lot of the fluff and has you focus on your specific wins, and puts the wording in ways that are kind of like neutral to whether you're talking to someone who is in wholesale versus someone who's in electronics versus someone who does apparel. It's the language that anyone can understand. And I find that a lot of talent acquisition people, they're not familiar. They have the job description and they have your resume. They're not really familiar with the lingo of your specific niche. So a lot of times it doesn't make sense to them.
Yeah, totally. Because a recruiter could be over 10 very different job functions. And you can only go so deep into each of those if you're not a specialist. And so to your point, sometimes being a little bit more broad or universal in your approach can be helpful for them.
Yeah.
Wow, that's crazy. So the resume you paid for resulted in one interview, and then the free resumes from EarnBetter resulted in around 30 interviews.
Yeah.
Wow. That's pretty awesome. Well, I'm glad you found us. I'm glad we could help.
Yeah.
I don't know if I've talked to anyone who's landed 30 interviews. So congrats on that.
Thank you.
That's awesome. And congrats on landing the role. That's
it's fantastic. It's interesting because I checked out a lot of other things, and I will say I would go through kind of like even like the cover letters. I would go through, and the funny thing is that I found that if I could take, this is weird, but I could take one AI generated and pop it into a different AI, and ask them to change the language or the tone. And eventually I got to something that sounded very authentic to me. So I learned to play with between the generated cover letter from EarnBetter and putting it through like ChatGPT, because it learned my verbiage, it learned my tone over like months of use, that I was able to get to things where I barely have to rewrite anything. I would say, hey, can you condense this down to 3 paragraphs and do it in a long, short, long sentence structure or whatever. And it would come off very conversational yet professional. So I thought that was really kind of cool to be able to do that. And so, it knew my resume and it could pull out things and say, hey, I'm going to insert that here. I'm going to take this information. I'm going to use your language. And I even used the same thing when I would do follow-up emails. because for me, a follow-up email is always feels like really uncomfortable. I'm not someone who sells myself naturally. So to have an email where I'm like, hey, it was great talking to you. I really want this job. Please consider me, like, and not sound desperate was weird.
Yeah, no, I hear you. And I mean, it's a really good opportunity to reiterate why you're a good fit, but sometimes it can feel a little uncomfortable or maybe pushy of like, oh,
Yeah.
here's everything that's great about me, even
Yeah.
though that's true. So
Yeah.
I get what you're saying. Anything else that was particularly helpful, or any other tools or features that you would recommend to other job seekers?
I think there's a lot to when I first got laid off, everybody's like, take some time and figure out what it is that you want. I'm like, I don't I honestly was like, I didn't feel like I had that luxury. Um and main earner in my home. And while my husband still had his job, that was great. And I had my severance coming in. It was also kind of like I knew it was this ticking clock. Um, and I'm reading horror stories online where people are like, I've been out of a job 15 months. I've been out of a job a year and a half. And you're just like, oh my Lord, I can't, like, that would be financial ruin. We can't do that. And I also knew that it was going to be hard because it's an election year. That causes major disruptions in the marketplace, and a lot of ambiguity, I think, for companies because they set a budget thinking this is going to be a weird, rough year, which is honestly probably why I got laid off in the first place. So anyone who has an opening, they're looking for that purple unicorn, you know?
Yeah.
And so at first I was like, all right, I'm going to jump in, and getting a job is my job. And I would spend 9 hours a day crawling through job boards and pinning things. And it literally got to the point where I felt so overwhelmed because I would find jobs and I would pin all these jobs. And I get to the end of the day, I'm like, I don't have the emotional, physical energy to now write my resume, tweak it, apply, follow up. It became overwhelming. Um, and my husband's always been a very good kind of yin to my yang. And he's like, you need to set a schedule like it's work. Like, you need to say, I'm going to look for jobs from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. And then I'm going to take a break and I'm going to do something normal with my life. And it was very hard for me to let go of that. But at the same time, stepping away and saying, I'm going to do laundry. Like, it sounds so trivial, but give myself a break away from it. Or even something as stupid as I'm going to go sit on the sofa. I'm going to play silly games on my phone, or I'm going to watch an episode of whatever on Netflix and just decompress so that I felt like I could be fresh. And it's kind of the same idea as if you're working on something highly intricate at work, where sometimes you need to step away and take a walk, uh,
Hmm.
clear your head, and kind of shake off any of that emotional energy. And once I started doing that, I started feeling a lot better about things. I didn't stress as much. And, I also tried to do very normal things on the weekends. Yes, I was on a budget, but I could still go outside and sit in the pool. I could still go to a brewery and have a beer and kind of relax,
Hmm.
take my dogs on a walk, anything that made my life feel more normal, and kind of keep myself regimented to these are my working hours rather than letting it kind of bleed over and staring at LinkedIn or Career Builder at 9 o'clock at night. Like, just step away. Like, don't do it. So I think that was a great thing that my husband kind of forced me into, because it did. It made my life feel easier. So I think that's a big piece of it. And honestly, following talent and acquisition people who seem to be like reaching out, and posting things that have nothing to do with their company on platforms like LinkedIn, or TikTok, or even Instagram. Um, they gave really great hints on how to get to like the hidden job market or the untapped job market, how to make searches so that they give you better results. Sometimes when you, like you were saying, it's, someone can call something A, but really it's B, and someone else calls it XYZ. Like, So being able to say, like, I want to look at jobs in Dallas that are like this. So how to put that in almost as like a Boolean search
Mhm.
and really reveal those jobs to you is fantastic. I also found, like, my husband actually now is using EarnBetter to look for a new job for himself. And he works in project management, but in market research. So it's not a traditional project manager IT type of job. And he's like, this tool is actually garnering him better results than looking for project manager jobs on other sites, which is wild. I think you just kind of have to play with things and be able to say that your search becomes more of the hard part rather
Mhm.
than retooling your resume over and over and over again for a specific job. Like let AI do the heavy lifting where it can, and then learn the tricks that recruiters use to find you, to find them.
Yeah, I love that. And yeah, I've heard from a few people using Boolean in different ways. And I actually heard somebody, this was either a week or two ago, and they would search for posts on LinkedIn that people were like, I'm hiring for this role. So it might not necessarily be open, or it might be, not as promoted as some of the other jobs, but you can find the people who are like, I'm hiring for project managers, and
Yes,
then reach out to those folks. Yeah.
it's wild.
Um,
Yeah, and a lot
I
of times they don't even get posted on LinkedIn. It's a link like to the company page. So
totally.
that's how you end up missing them.
Yeah, for sure. And I really liked what you were talking about earlier about kind of the balancing of everything and making sure that you are, making time for yourself, because it can be really stressful and daunting and overwhelming. And obviously everybody, wants to get to that next paycheck as quickly as possible. But if you just job search 12 hours a day, every day, that's just really, really tough mentally. And so making time and space for yourself, I think, is really important. And what you were saying about making a schedule and kind of sticking to it.
Yeah, definitely.
Um, that pretty much covers it. I mean, any other like tips or advice, or anything else you would suggest to people who are on the job search, might be in, month 6, how to keep going?
Yeah, I think um, it's one of the best kind of pieces of advice that I got from someone is that you don't have to find your forever job. You just have to find a job. And as things kind of get longer, it feels awful, right? Um, so you really have to sit down and talk to yourself about, and it's really hard to do at first when you first get laid off or when you're first searching, to sit down and say, what are the things that are my must-haves? What are the things that are my nice to haves and my like to haves? And negotiate with yourself on those things. And it could be that your number one is, no matter what, I have to have at least X dollars in salary. And it could be that it's, 70% of what you were making. It may be that you're like, I was severely underpaid and it needs to be 120% of what I was making, like whatever that is. But be able to talk to yourself about where's my floor, right? And know that, try not to expend any energy on things that are below that because you feel desperate. It's super scary, but at the same time, if you work through your budget and you say, I know this is what I'm putting out. This is, if I have savings, this is how long, anything above what I'm bringing in from unemployment or my severance or whatever, to fortify that. And rely on, and talk to your friends about it. Like, networking is super, super big. I obviously didn't get this job through networking, but I had a lot of opportunities through networking. Whether it was a friend recommending me to their HR department, and they called me and said, hey, we don't have anything right now, but let's have a talk. It's great to open up those doors, get your foot in, and then stay in regular contact, which seems like a lot, and it is, but this is how the job market has changed in 2024 versus even 2019. Like, it's so completely different. Companies everywhere are leaner, meaner. They don't have, 30 HR specialist recruiters, they might have 5. And so really it's important to try and stay on their radar as much as possible. And reach out to people. And it sounds silly to be like, I haven't talked to that person though in 10 years. You're like, it doesn't matter. It's fine to reach out and say, I recently found myself unemployed. I would love your help. They might not have anything, or they might say, hey, if you see a job posted here, I will walk your resume to the hiring manager. I will find that person. And that's sometimes the foot in the door that you need, especially in this day and age when, you look at a job posting and it's like 10,000 people have applied.
Yeah. And I feel like usually you're surprised by how much people want to help and how open and willing people are, especially in today's market. And knowing that it could be you in another 6 or 9 months that somebody's reaching out to for help. It could be, the situation swapped. And I feel like people are, and this is, generalization, but for somebody that and you've worked with, they're typically open to chatting with you, or, at least opening up their network, or saying, if you see something on my company, let me know.
Right.
And also even having informal chats, that helps you make, you feel like you're making progress, which
Right.
is better than just submitting applications and not hearing anything.
Right.
So I think that's a really good point.
Yeah.
Well, as we close out, anything else that you would say about EarnBetter, any of our services, anything that worked well?
I will say that being able to track the companies that I'm interested in, track the jobs I've actually applied to, was fantastic, for 2 reasons. Number one, if I got an email like 6 weeks later, I'm like, who, what? Like, there's a haze. I feel like I've applied to so many jobs. I could go back and say, oh, it's this job. And am I still interested? And is this a good fit? And if it's, if it's a shift or a tweak, at least I can prepare for that. And honestly, also for unemployment, man, it's, they're like, how many job searches did you do? I can tell you because I can track it. I know exactly how many jobs I have applied to during that time frame. I know exactly how many interviews I've had, people I've talked to. I think that's huge. It's a super big help. I love being able to archive things, even if, it wasn't a fit, but maybe it was close to a fit, or it was a company I was really interested in. I can go back to that archive and go, oh yeah, let's see if they have anything else that's popped up, and I can go through and I can search, because it's a great aggregator, right? And the cool thing is that it aggregates from multiple sites. So I don't have to have one tab open on Glassdoor, and one tab open on Career Builder, and one tab open on Google, and another tab open on LinkedIn. I know that it's aggregating for me. So that, and it might be a day or 2 behind, but you're not, 9 times out of 10, you're not going to miss out on a job. And if something is posted for 15 hours, they're only doing it for legal reasons. They're filling it from within. So don't get upset if you see something and it disappears overnight. It wasn't meant to be. So
totally.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Megan. I really appreciate it. And good luck in the new role. And we're very excited for you.
Thank you, Molly. I really, really appreciate it.